The ancient town and port of Faversham, a limb of the Cinque Ports, boasts the oldest bypass, the Roman road called Watling Street. From here, travelling in a northerly direction, one finds the town, so full of history, this visual story will only tell a part of it. A simple watering trough dating back to 1899 stands at the entrance to the rather grand mall, with its broad promenade dating back to 1773. The long red brick wall encompasses the gardens of Mall House, a fine Georgian property dating back to 1763. Here the Mall ends and Preston Street commences. Rate House, almost as imposing though not as old, it was named after the original owner, Henry Rate, a solicitor and great benefactor to the town. This subway, which was constructed in 1898, replaces the level crossing which was put there when the railway first arrived. The Georgian residence, Delbridge House, was a boarding school in 1830. The 19th century water tower, built by the East Kent Railway Company to slake the thirst of their steam engines, now the abode of a potter and his wheel. This pottery started life in the crypt of St Michael the Archangel on the Mount in Bristol. A rather unusual garden has been made in the water tank at the top of the tower. In 1858, the East Kent Railway Company opened a single track from Strood to Faversham, and the original station was built. By 1860, the company was renamed the London, Chatham and Dover Railway, and was operating a regular service to Victoria. Chase House, dated 1803, continues the journey along Preston Street. 56 Preston Street, the vicarage for the parish church, dates from 1848 and was built by the Shepherd family. Opposite, on the eastern side of the street, is the United Church, formerly the Methodist, erected in 1808. Beautifully restored shop, the studding now exposed had been covered in plaster for many years, believed to be 15th century. The Alexander Centre, originally known as Gatefield House, the portico bears the town coat of arms. In all essentials it is the same as the royal coat of arms. No other town in the country shares this privilege. Two town maces are made from silver gilt. The Commonwealth mace was altered in 1660 and the Cinque Port mace dates back to 1755. The Moot Hall is early 14th century and is one of the oldest existing in the country. It is made of brass and covered with leather. This is the chain of office worn by the mayor. Gayfield Lane, part of the oldest walkway in the town. This right-of-way extended from Tanner's Green to Mackenade, probably 2 miles or so in length. Jacob's House, number 76 Preston Street, a 15th century building. The front is covered with mathematical tiles, which give timber-framed houses a brick appearance. The Fleur-de-Lis, Faversham's Heritage Centre, a 15th century building and an inn for 500 years. Jacob's Yard, a medieval courtyard off of Preston Street. Numbers 7 and 8 Preston Street, a fine specimen of domestic architecture. Number 7 is 15th century. Previous to 1741, it was the Black Boy Inn. Number 1 East Street, built of yellow stock bricks with terracotta ornaments. Its Dutch character represents the Dutch influence in many East Kent buildings. The wheat sheaf emblem implies its early use, a seed and corn merchant. The Swan Inn, 18th century, originally known as the White Swan in 1803. One Marketplace, a painter's dream with double jetties and mathematical tiles. The Guildhall, originally built as a market hall in 1574, was the third town hall. Severely damaged by fire, it was totally rebuilt in 1814 upon the oak columns. On the western side is an old chemist. Its early 19th century shopfront conceals a mid-15th century timber-framed house with a courtyard. The local fish market was here, and the leaden pump was installed to accommodate the fishermen. 'Tis said that the pump will deliver beer, not water, on Christmas Day. Court Street creates an atmosphere that is in keeping with its history, much altered, cobbled in sympathy with its old buildings. Number 1 Court Street, a Jacobean structure, once the home and business of George Becket, mayor to the town in the mid-18th century. Number 40, for nearly 200 years, the home and surgery of the Gange family of doctors. The close studding of 11A suggests 17th century, preserved by brewers Shepherd Neame, who claim being the oldest family brewery in England. The hop vines, so significant and essential for the brewers, are depicted here. Hop picking by hand, an occupation which no longer exists since the advent of the picking machine. So we no longer have large numbers of people coming down from London and the Medway towns to help. Opposite the Shepherd Neame Brewery stands the former home of George Edward Rigdon, a competitor, dated 1580. This was the home of Mayor John Trouts, who entertained King Charles II here in 1660. The parish church, St Mary of Charity, the second largest parish church in Kent. Its huge spire stands 152 feet high. The crown spire is almost unique. Only about half a dozen exist in Britain today. The arch gateway, dated 1862, is dedicated to Henry Hatch, benefactor to the town, the date of erection being on the north side and the date of his death, 1533, on the south side. Queen Elizabeth I, the original grammar school, built in 1567 on land given by William Saker. The school existed until 1879. The doorway of number 5 has Doric columns with a frieze decorated with rosettes. Number 19, 15th century, with mathematical tiles added to the timber framing. Altered in the 18th century, but the double jetty remains. Numbers 82 and 84, built by Henry Saker in 1598. The pediment is supported by a pair of grotesque heads. The Globe House, 1519, was once an inn. Arden's house, built as the Abbey guest house in the latter part of the 15th century. The northern wall of the house being part of the Abbey gatehouse. One of the few remaining medieval warehouses left on the side of the creek. Boat building by James Pollock and Sons became a major industry, and these ships, when launched, were a great attraction. They employed the sideway launch technique, creating a huge splash. Davington Parish Church and Priory, dedicated to both St Mary Magdalene and St Lawrence, can be dated back to 1153, when the priory was founded. By the early 19th century, the church was in a dilapidated condition. Restoration is attributed to Thomas Willimant, who purchased the buildings in 1845. Willimant was heraldic painter to George IV. The preserved chart mills, the oldest gunpowder mills in the world, going back to 1560, provided powder for Nelson and Wellington at Waterloo in 1653. The Bull Inn, a fine 15th century pub, boasted Henry VIII once stayed there. From here, Lower West Street was the town's main shopping area for centuries. Evidence of this is that the old properties retain their shop windows of yesteryear. This was the Castle Inn, now another redundant pub. The Corporation Wall, indicative of the first road widening in North Lane. These beautifully restored properties, dated about 1600, unusual for Kent, and occupied mainly by local business people over the 400 years. This patterned framing more in sympathy with Cheshire or West Midlands. The Sun Inn, a 15th century hall which was altered in the 16th century and added to in the 17th century. Gulliver's Seed Shop, the Parget Inn, wonderfully restored and dated, although the cellar with its tunnels is 12th century and is said to be haunted.
Are you?
Standing at the head of West Street, this fine double-jetted building is now a restaurant. The imposing structure of 30 almshouses and their chapel was built in 1863 at a cost of £10,583, some 470 feet long, and once described as a masterpiece of its kind, replacing older almshouses dotted around the town. This was made possible by a bequest by Henry Rate, a wealthy solicitor. In 1951, the Ministry of Works spent a large sum of money restoring this fine old building, the Maison Dieu, as an ancient monument, equipping it as a museum. King Henry III in 1230 founded the Hospital of the Blessed Mary here, and it was always entitled Maison Dieu. We hope you have enjoyed this short trip around historical Faversham.